Courttia, how are you?
I'm good. I'm very good. Yeah.
Well, listen, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to talk to us about Small Axe, the Anthology, which is directed by Steve McQueen, which is on the BBC this week. Thank you very much for your time. I'm going to jump straight in and ask you about how you first became attached to the Small Axe project.
Yeah. So I tell everyone this story. I was kind of like, watching it happen. I knew that it was happening, and I was kind of thinking to myself, this is a really good project. It's something that I'm very, very suitable for because I'm a West Londoner. All my novels are about West London. I write screenplays. I'm here, man. You know what I mean? So, but yeah, it was happening, and I was just like, okay, well, maybe it was going. I hadn't got a call, so I was very much like, okay, resigned. So that's it. I'm going to be sitting down in the cinema watching it like everybody else. And then I got a call. Yeah, like just one day I was doing another project in Sheffield, and then he got in touch with me, and it was just like coming to the office to talk about working on the Steve McQueen project, they called it at that time. It wasn't called Small Axe. So I went and met with the producers, head of development, talked about scripts and stuff, and they said, okay, that's cool. We like your scripts, we like you. Next, you're gonna meet Steve. And yeah, met Steve, had the interview. Yeah, it went well, and that was it. Yeah. I was. So we did 5 weeks, 6 weeks or so in total in a writer's room, and we just worked on the whole anthology series at that point. Worked on it was 6 episodes then. I think we treated Mangrove as 2 separate episodes and stuff. But deep in our hearts, I think everybody wanted it to be filmed. Working with Steve McQueen, man, we're like, okay, yeah. So the idea was we just treat it like films. Like I was anyway in my head. I was like, okay, we've got to think of this like a film. And then luckily later on, they decided to make it into film. Red, White and Blue is more, for me, more structured. It's more like scene by scene. It's got a very strong, consistent storyline, and it's really very linear. Whereas Lovers Rock, like you say, is more open. It's kind of, in a sense, more abstract. So my approach to Lovers Rock, because I wrote that second, was I'm going to do an art house movie about Black people. That was my approach. I'm going to, I want to treat it like, like European film or something like that. Some of the things that I love. And it's less about story and more about character and environment, setting and mood, music and everything. So, and that was the main differences between the two, really.
Speaking about Lovers Rock specifically, I think the one, just the thing that I loved about it the most was just that experience. I mean, I'm a child of the 80s. I was born in 1980. So I never attended these parties, but I was always the kid who was being transported to the parties and put upstairs in the room and could always hear the bass bumping from downstairs and the smells and everything, all of those, that atmospheric conditions that came to be. And I'm just wondering how you go about writing something like that, because some of the most powerful moments in that film are, without dialogue, seeing the condensation on the walls, the a cappella of Silly Games, all of those moments that I just felt so proud watching that on screen. How do you go about creating that and so it translates on screen?
A lot of discussion, first and foremost, in the room between mainly myself and Steve and Alex Wheatle. And Alex is like really pivotal as a beginning and a starting point, because I was born in 73, right? So I was like you in a sense, although a little bit older, but I was the kid that was being brought to those dances. So I saw everything through a very, very waist level version, and I was the kid that was left upstairs with the coats and stuff as well, running around with the other kids. But I was a little bit precocious as well. I would always come out of the room and I would always come downstairs, and sometimes I even wanted to jump on the mic, to be honest.
Oh wow!
Those
bold kids, yeah.
There were a couple of those like there was those kid MCs from Jamaica that I was really into, man. I was like, if he's like so and so age and he can do it, I can't remember the name, but there's a couple of kid MCs at the time, and I wanted to be like them. So they would let me the mic, they would give me the mic sometimes and let me go on and do my little thing and then laugh at me and then send me back upstairs. You know what I mean? So I had that point of view, but Alex was a teenager. And Alex was, he was coming of age in that. So his memories were a lot more vivid. So he told us like Kung Fu fighting, that came from him. And I was just like, what? I can't really, because obviously I know the song, but I was like, they played that in the dance, and he was like, yes, definitely. Then I go back and tell my mum and say, Alex said they played kung fu fighting in the dance. Was that true? She was like, yeah, of course. And then like, so I talked with my mum a lot as well, got her memories. And I spoke with my Auntie Verma. She gave me a lot of insights and stuff. And that was where the whole storyline of Bammy came about, was from what my Aunt Verma told me, because she gave me a slightly different insight, you know, into what some of the things that obviously the guys wouldn't talk about so much. She would say, this is my experience of what it was like there, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, lots of different viewpoints, you know?
Yeah, and I was going to touch on that actually, because I think some of the characters that feel at some points peripheral to the main narrative almost have their own arc within it. And there's a number of characters that have their sort of mini arc within the story. And I wanted to talk to you about the importance of that. I wonder if you could talk about the process of creating those, you know, I don't want to say smaller characters, but the characters that don't necessarily are the characters that aren't with us for the entirety of the story.
Yeah. I mean, you needed like, you know, two lead characters, and there was always this idea of these two lead characters who basically were going to fall in love. And you know, we knew we wanted to see like, it's Lovers Rock, man. How can you do Lovers Rock if people don't fall in love, you know? So there's that, and then the freshness and joy and newness of a new relationship and all that kind of thing, the promise, you know, that we wanted to bring to it. But I also think we needed, like, it's a communal experience basically, you know, so you needed to be able to touch on what other people were going through in the night. Some people whose nights weren't that successful. People like Clifton, who had his own like tiny little journey and stuff, and came into himself, you know what I mean, and got a chance to express himself on the dance floor and with the mic as well, you know. Those were really important to us. So it couldn't have been just like, you know, a singular or a dual narrative. It had to be a collective narrative, because that's what the story was essentially about. So yeah, that dictates to you, you know, what you do with the story, the fact that we're talking about a communal experience, and so we had to structure it in a communal way. Does that make sense?
Absolutely makes sense, definitely. And you know, what is really important, and something that I truly respect to you, you know, the people who created it, yourself and others, was that it was so unapologetic. You know, it wasn't it just literally put you in the moment without trying to explain too much. It was very much, it felt like it was for us. Was that very much your intention, you know, making it for people who remember that time, or people like me who have, you know, slightly fragmented memories of that time? But you know, was it about, you know, creating that moment for us? Like, can you talk to us about the, I guess, the intention of that work?
Yeah, I mean, Steve was very clear about that, and this is why it's really interesting for me, because Steve was very clear about that. But that's something I always try and do, and I'm very conscious of like the outsider's gaze in our storytelling, you know what I mean? And like when people are explaining things, I teach creative writing, and I always get upset when a student, my students who, any of them are watching this, they'll know, like, when you start talking about how to make roti, I get upset, you know what I mean? So I'm like, who are you talking to? You know what I mean? Like, we know, you know what I mean? So don't do that. Like, make it a story where you don't have to explain that. And my analogy is, when I read a story where someone explains how to make a cup of tea, or when I read a story where someone explains how to make fish and chips, then all right, cool, you can do that. But until that point in time, we're not doing that here. These stories are for us, and so we don't need to explain. And I think, you know, Steve agreed with that. You know, he didn't say go that far in so many words, but just from the things he was talking about, you know, the ritual of doing this and rolling the dumplings and things like that, you know. From that, I was like, okay, we're on the same page. All right, that's what I'm going to do. And he gave me the freedom to just pursue that route and pursue that style of storytelling.
So we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about a film I've yet to see, which is Red, White and Blue, the other film that you co-written. So I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about that, you know, that story, and a little bit, you know, a bit of synopsis on that.
Yeah, so Red, White and Blue is about a child of the 80s, a man of the 80s as well, Leroy Logan. He's a research scientist, and basically his father is beaten up. It's not spoilers to say this. His father is beaten up by the police. You know, he's not there at the time when it happens, but he's beaten up by the police quite badly. And Leroy's reaction to that is to want to join the police force and change things from the inside. I mean, and you know, I think I'll leave it there. I don't want to say any more about what happens, but yeah, basically that's the story in a nutshell. I've never had to write about someone who was actually real before, and then even more than that, I've never had to write about someone who was literally sitting in the room and looking me in the eye all the time, you know, like, So I was massively intimidated. I remember the day, I'll never forget it, when Steve came up to me and put his arm around me and said, "I want you to do Leroy Logan," because that's what it was called at the time. And I was like, okay. Because I was like, this is a huge responsibility. And it's a great story, but I was really intimidated. But you know what? Actually, the thing that I was worried about became the greatest strength for that, because Leroy gave me his details. If I ever had a question, I went onto Twitter and I DM'd him. I said, can we do a phone call? He gave me an hour of his time. Leroy said at the screening that we had that he spoke to me more than he spoke to his wife. I mean, during that time, in the 2 years that I was writing the scripts and stuff. And I would call him constantly, and he would always be available. He'd give me pictures from those days and stuff of him in uniform, or him on holiday with Gretel, his wife. And it was massively helpful. Like basically, my research was right there. It was just one person, or not one person. I talked to Gretel and I talked to Lee John as well. He gave me a good few hours of his time as well. And we just talked about aspects of the story that I needed help with. And it became a real strength. I could just call him and talk to him. It was amazing. So, it was really, I've never done it before, but I found it really easy. And Leroy really made it easy.
Mm-hmm. Now, I want to talk about the anthology as a whole. I mean, how important do you think that these films being shown in this time, having the 2020 that we've all had, how important do you think that these films being shown at this time on a platform like the BBC is?
Well, it's massively important. I mean, this is going to go out, BBC One. Everyone can see it. They can see it for free. You don't have to stream or anything like that. You just pay a TV license. And due to the nature of the times, I think people are indoors in a way that they probably haven't been for a long, long time. It's like it is like the 80s, basically. It's like the old days, And although it's sad how that's come about, it's really interesting from the point of view of someone who's created something that's going to be shown. So I think it's massively important for people to see Black British people in a way that we've never been seen before, and also talking about things that have never really been, shown in film in any capacity at all. So it's amazing, and I think people will get to see us as we really are, like you say, unapologetically. It's slices of our lives, and in some ways, it might help people to understand what we went through a little bit more, even if they don't understand us entirely. I'm not believing that it's going to change people's minds in a sense, but there is going to be a sense of, okay, that's our similarities a little bit more than maybe before, when they never got to see things like this,
Yeah. And, just going back to Lovers Rock, I think, you without giving too many spoilers away, but I think there are so many challenges that, Black people were facing at that time. I think about the last couple of scenes with your main character played by Michael Ward, who, there's scenes there, and then obviously Amara's character when she's come into the party. There's so many challenges there, and I think in the middle of that there's this joyful party that you've shown, and I think showing Black joy is such an important thing and something that we need to celebrate. That's why I'm so glad that this work is being, being made, but also being seen by such a huge audience.
Yeah, it's massively important. But I mean, also, as well as Black joy, what you get to see is Black sanctuary. You get to see people actually carving out a space for themselves, which is very, very separate to the world outside. This is the place where people came after a hard week's working to be themselves and to join with other people, and they dealt with all sorts of stuff outside on the streets, as we try and hint at with Amara and Michael and stuff. There's loads of stuff they had to deal with, but for this one night you can throw it off, man, and you can be yourselves, and I think that's a really beautiful thing. And it also, thinking about it, it gave me, as a young man born in Britain, kind of trying, not really understanding where my parents had come from. It gave me a little slice of, recognition and stuff. So I wouldn't feel so disconnected from my past. And I didn't recognize that at the time. It's only now, actually, when I'm talking to you, that I'm thinking about it like that, to be honest with you. That, it did something for us. It passed on to us a sense of where we came from, which is really strong. And it was only when I started looking back on that with real seriousness in order to write these projects that I realized what a gift it was that I've been given, by my parents, it seems quite irresponsible for my dad to take me to the dance and get me on the mic in a smoky room with all these guys and women and everything going on, you know what I mean? But in fact, it gave us a real sense of our cultural heritage, you know what I mean? Which stayed with me, obviously, until today, you know? So I think it's hugely important for us, you know, us kids that were there to have that, you know?
Mm. And I've got to say, watching Lovers Rock, and you know, I watched it at London Film Festival, and it stayed with me because I think there were so many times when, you know, we had to wear a mask and everything, but I was smiling from ear to ear because I was just, like you, I was so proud of our culture, and it's, you know, something that I hadn't necessarily forgotten, but something that it had to be awoken in me, you know. So that was a really positive thing. And I wanted to finish up with just asking you about, you know, the idea of Sankofa, the idea of going back and fetching what's useful and bringing it forward to the future. Obviously, all of these stories are based on historical either facts or memories or experiences. But how can we, as Black people, as a wider community, use these stories, engage with these stories, and use that to propel us forward into the future?
I think that's a really good question, and I'm really glad you brought up Sankofa, because I think that's embedded in the spirit of the anthology as a whole. You know, like you know, we are looking back, but we are looking back to go forward, and that's what was happening at that time. Steve said something really interesting about, you know, the Daba and everything, in the sense that it is like they were creating something new. Like, even though it felt like they were trying to recreate the past in the Caribbean, they ended up creating something fresh and new, you know? I think we use it in any way we see fit. You know, like, there's no prescribed way for us to be, and there's no prescribed way for us to engage with, you know, our history, in a sense. You know, I don't feel we should be telling people what they should do. If you take those films and you sit there with a smile behind your mask, that is enough. You know, that is enough. That's okay. And you can just do that. That's fine. Because our ancestors went through so much. They fought so much. You know, I mean, some people gave their lives and stuff in order for us to be able to sit in the cinema and smile. Wow. I mean, that's it. That's it. That's all it is, man. And so we don't have to do anything else. It's fine. Let's just do that.
Well, what a way to end our time together. Courttia, I'd like to thank you. Congratulations on this work. I can't wait for people to see it. And thank you again. Appreciate it.
Cheers, man. Awesome.